In this lecture, I'll be talking about individual student profiles. The profiles are built based on what we learn when getting to know our students. You don't have to be the expert who knows each student's learning processes. Students often know which ways of learning are most effective for them. It behooves you to dialogue with a student to determine what it might be. Do you decide for them? Not so much, though sometimes you have to. They don't control you. But students often know which ways of learning are most effective for them. Students also often know what their barriers are. The typical university teaching approach of using PowerPoint slides, I know, is a barrier for deaf learners. I know that, but most instructors would assume that style of teaching would create no barriers. After all, the slides are very visual with images, text, color, and so on. But it is a barrier to learning for students like me. So same idea, check with your students. Listen to what students say about their own learning. You may be thinking they're not learning anything, but they are learning. They may be learning outside of the classroom. We must be humble. Learning does not just take place in school. They are learning from what they're watching on TV, from their family, from games, through their interactions with their community. They are learning in many different ways, and their learning preferences may not include school. You'll need to figure that out. Get them to share their learning stories where they were really engaged in the activity, assignment, or content. And the reverse. It's hard to see the photo on this slide. It's part of a production representing deaf students' learning stories. At the beginning of the project, we gathered all the learning stories from the students' elementary school experiences. Based on this information, we created a play. They performed their experiences of language deprivation. It was sad. You can use inventories and other assessment tools to collect important information about your students. Interest inventories of various sorts can help them and you identify what they like and what they don't like, what they are interested in or not interested in. You also inquire about what they tend to do after school, whether they are involved in sports or other activities. Ask about their families. All this is useful information to you. There are all about me inventories and checklists that can be used. Obviously, administer these tools at the beginning of the school year. Doing it in the middle of the school year is too late. Once you have collected it, then you can start planning your lessons. You're seeking a 360-degree understanding and insights into each student's likes and dislikes, interests, affinities, to understand their lives, communities, and environments. You will use these insights to plan learning activities that engage and motivate your students. For me, I have never really gotten into video games. Don't find it enjoyable, not my thing at all. But I had one student who was pretty addicted. More than once, he would be gaming all night on a school night. Obviously, he found it more interesting. So my response was more to scold him, telling him he needed his sleep. and shouldn't be gaming all night. But I never sat down with him and asked him what he found so fascinating about his gaming. After a bit of research, I saw there were ways to incorporate gaming into lessons plans. That was my oversight. Hopefully you can learn from my mistakes. Believe me, I have made every mistake in the book. Social inventories help to assess social competence and tendencies. Many of the students I worked with didn't say please or thank you. They didn't know the norms for carrying out a conversation. They didn't know conversations had a beginning, middle, and end. Those are necessary skills. Determine how the students get along with each other and how they function in groups. Some students overtake a group and hold the floor by continuing to talk, not allowing others to contribute. Other students will frequently interrupt others. So observe how they behave as well as what needs to be improved. I want to pause for a moment here to say that using checklists to get to know your students, including their cultural background and languages, is not culturally responsive pedagogy. Your checklists and inventories are providing you with valuable information about them. But what are you giving in return? You have all that information. You have all the power. You as the teacher have assembled all this information about them, which is evidence of your power. What kind of power do the students have? I often asked my students, "Did you get some power today?" They would be taken by surprise and would ask me, What power? How do I get power?" I would tell them that there are ways they could get power as a deaf person. Well, they were certainly interested to know more about that. My point is, we should share the power with our students. Don't hoard it just for ourselves. Asking them to open up to us is not culturally responsive pedagogy. Most people don't want to reveal themselves to that extent without getting something back. Where is the third space? There's the teacher's space, the student's space, and there's the space where the two come together, interact, and engage. We refer to it as the third space, where the relationship is reciprocal. That's culturally responsive pedagogy, and it's difficult. When dealing with a learner with a disability, it's important to keep in mind that the main issue is their feeling of powerlessness. Everyone but them is making decisions for them. The people with the power are the teachers, the doctors, parents, and so on. So the student grows up feeling powerless, that they lack control. But I'd say there's a shift starting in that regard, and persons with disabilities are asserting control. Under the old model, we were taught to be grateful to the others who were making decisions for us. I'm going to give an example of an activity that is culturally responsive. Each student brings or is given a shoebox. Inside their boxes, they build a diorama. It's meant to reflect their own living rooms. You as the teacher also do this activity. So everyone builds their living rooms, putting in furniture, painting walls, hanging pictures to create their living rooms. Then everyone takes turn to talk about what they made and about their family's living room. You would be surprised at the insights you can get about their lives from this activity. Simultaneously, it empowers the students. They have the power to share about themselves, their families, and their homes. You've never seen my living room. That's bad. But I have a piano. I have bookshelves. I have a dresser with knickknacks on it. I have plants. I have a couch. I have a hydroponic garden. I have lamps and pictures hanging on the walls. I have my grandmother's painting of a log cabin hanging on my living room wall, one of my most prized possessions. What have you learned about me? You know I love books, that I treasure my grandmother's art. I'm a plant lover. You now know 3 things about me you didn't know before. And I didn't even make a shoebox for you. Maybe someday I will. Another tip is to do reading inventories at the beginning of the school year to find out what they like to read. What do they do with their reading? Some people read because they want to make something. Some people read all about sports. Others like novels, just pleasure reading. Still others, it's nonfiction or historical material. Completing the inventory will encourage the learner to reflect on what they actually enjoy reading. They'll learn more about themselves. A final reading inventory can be distributed at the end of the school year. This can help to identify how their reading habits may have changed. Have they evolved from reading shorter, simpler books to thicker, more complex books by the end of the year? Also, their final reading inventories can then be passed on to the student's teacher for next year. That could be useful for the next teacher when trying to plan lessons and materials for their classroom. Knowing your students can require an unexpected amount of paperwork. This program comes out of Alberta. There is a link on the slide. The site contains all manner of inventories, checklists, and surveys to help you get to know your students. In addition, there are several options for developing student profiles on the website, so check that out. Here's an example of a high school course inventory. It asks about the student's background in the course content. Have they taken courses on this topic before? What kinds of experience do they have in that area? Do they read on the subject on their own time? That kind of thing. Thank you for listening to my presentation.